Pre-made Anki decks, on the most part, don't work. And in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why this is the case and what you can do about it. How can you fix your Anki language learning? Hi guys, it's Will here. I'm a medical student currently doing a PhD. I've learned Mandarin for 5 years now, and on this channel I'm on a mission to try and get as many people to conversational fluency as possible using some of the methods that I've gained along these 5 years of experience. So what are the problems with pre-made Anki decks? Well, here's a scenario for you. So you've been learning Mandarin for a while now, maybe some months or some years, and you realize there's this shortcut that you just go to Anki.web and you can download a nice deck with, I don't know, intermediate expressions of Mandarin or intermediate words of Mandarin for a set level, and you download them all and you start going through them. But as you do so, you realize you're not retaining as much of them or being able to use them in context as you would like. Now, there's a few problems here that result in this kind of situation. First of all, they're random. Like if someone else has put these words into a deck for you, they're random without the context. You don't know the context that they've come from. And because of that, there's a chance that you may not have come across them before at all. And the problem here is that if you haven't come across them at all before, then you're trying to use Anki to learn rather than review. And this is a big problem. You ideally want to have come across a word in a few different contexts before you add it to Anki. So at least you have somewhat of an idea of what this word means and how the way in which it's used. This will really help you. So when you're doing your reviews, one, you'll retain them a bit better, and two, it will transition a lot more easily into kind of active vocabulary where you're able to use it. So we've covered the first point, they're random. The second point is that they're, as I've briefly mentioned there, they're out of context. So you want to be learning things in context as much as possible, and ideally a personalized context. So personalization, if you're just learning words with cards that aren't really personalized to you, then you're missing out on a lot of the gains that personalization will bring you in order to kind of retain things a bit better. So we'll talk about a few ways in which we can combat these in a bit later. So what this all will kind of result in, if you carry on, using these pre-made decks and not really doing anything else, then eventually you'll end up trying to speak and it feels like, you're trying to put IKEA furniture together, but without any instructions or any tools at all. And it's an absolute mess and an absolute nightmare. Now, I don't want that for you guys. So let's talk about how we can fix it. But before I do talk about how we can fix it, I think I've been a bit harsh here. So I'm going to go and briefly talk about when pre-made decks can be useful. Now, in my opinion, there's three kind of scenarios in which pre-made Anki decks may save you a lot of time and be quite convenient. The first of which is if you're a beginner and you just need to know the first few hundred words of a language so that you can start inputting, can start enjoying things in the language that you want to look at and kind of get yourself a foundation in the language. Then I think saving yourself the time rather than, going and finding frequency lists or finding, I don't know, for example, HSK in Mandarin, just going and finding a HSK list and copying and pasting everything into Anki. I think in that situation, using a pre-made deck will definitely save you time and be very beneficial. So I'd actually recommend it in that kind of situation. The second scenario is to prime yourself before a lesson. So for example, if you know that you're going to be having a lesson regarding a certain topic in Mandarin or the language that you're learning, then learning some vocab that you're going to come across. For example, I don't know, your teacher, your tutor, or like your language exchange partner tells you you're going to come across, then learning those words in advance will increase your comprehension during the lesson. So you're kind of priming yourself to learn them a bit better in the lesson if you kind of spend some time beforehand preparing. In this kind of situation, using a pre-made deck that, I don't know, for example, your teacher has made for you about that, would not necessarily be a bad idea. I think, it would be quite beneficial. So the final kind of scenario is that you've been given a pre-made deck in order to review things that you've learned in a particular lesson. So in my Chunking Chinese course, this is what I do. I kind of give the option of using pre-made flashcards for lessons that I've taught, set phrases, set vocab in. And in this situation, I think it works quite well again because it saves people time. Like if you don't have to go through yourself and make the flashcards, but you know that these flashcards are highly relevant to you because you've gone through the lesson. They also work. They're also in a story, in a context that you want to kind of be reading anyway. then in that situation, having these pre-made flashcards that you know are testing you on content that's actually come up in the story, this again, I think is completely okay. So I think to sum up here, the problems really are the lack of relevance, the randomness, and the lack of context, right? So if you're not encountering those problems, then the pre-made flashcards aren't going to cause you any issues at all. So if you're sure you're going to come across the words that you're learning very soon, then priming yourself is fine. If you've already come across these words in a familiar context, in a context relevant to you, then reviewing them with pre-made flashcard decks is also fine. And with the beginner example, that's again coming back to the point that you can be sure if you learn the first few hundred most common words in a language, you're of course going to come across them again and again and again in input. So again, you're kind of priming yourself for things that you know you're going to come across. So again, that's not an issue at all. So, all right, if your situation doesn't fall into the three kind of categories I just spoke about regarding when pre-made flashcard decks can work, then what's the solution? What should you actually be doing? Here's my suggestion. I suggest that you first go and find content that you're interested in that's relevant to you. And as you go through it, whether you're listening or reading, you dig into it and you find words, phrases, sentence patterns, example sentences that you're interested in and you want to be able to use that you think will help improve your spoken Mandarin or, the spoken level of whatever language you're learning. And then from there, you're going to make your own flashcard deck. Now, this is going to be your highly personalized, highly relevant deck that you're going to keep with you for probably years, and you're going to spend time just gradually building it up day by day. So every day you can spend a little bit of time working with that input and then deciding which of these words, phrases, or sentence patterns, etc., should be added into Anki. And then you can add them in either using, like basic and reverse cards, which are quite useful, or just going for closed deletions, which I recommend and talk about in other videos. So as I mentioned earlier, these should be ideally, you're making cards from content that you're actually interested in and that you enjoy. So there you've got the context and you've also got the interest, so it's not random. So again, I want to emphasize, you want to be making cards for words that you personally want to know, not that someone else has told you need to know or that a textbook has told you need to know. This way it's more relevant to you and your life, and it's not some random pre-made deck feel. And finally, the big point I want to make that I briefly mentioned earlier was personalize the cards to you and your life. So this can involve adding pictures, adding funny stories, adding, mnemonics, or having example sentences kind of include people relevant to your life. So for example, I remember when I was, learning different subjects university that people study, I would actually kind of have example sentences to prime myself, to have the prompts to get me to recall the name of the subject in Chinese. I would actually use my friends that were studying those subjects, because then it's like really anchored it to something relevant to my life, and it's really personalized as well because they're my friends. So guys, I really hope that's helped you. Let me know if you've got any more questions about how to use Anki in order to get the most out of your Mandarin learning. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Guys, if you're enjoying my Mandarin tips, I'd actually recommend going and subscribing to my 7-day email course where I talk about more in-depth Mandarin learning methods. I'll also help you learn 80 key chunks, so 50 sentence starters and 30 sentence patterns that I think are really important for conversational Mandarin, with the help of 2 PDFs that I built and flashcards too. So if you're interested, go and check that out in the link in the description below, or scan the QR codes to go and sign up for that. I look forward to seeing you inside.